You deserve to know, and I'm going to tell you. One of the most common questions I get when talking with new buyers is how much is it going to cost me to buy this house? Well, I wanted to put this video together to talk to you guys about what the upfront costs look like and what you can do to kind of mitigate some of those things. So let's get into it. So when you purchase a home, there's going to be two types of costs right out of the gate. You're going to have costs that you pay outside of your closing, and then you're going to have costs that you pay at closing, which are inherently called, you guessed it, closing costs. So we have signed a contract. Everything's been executed. Now it's time to start writing checks. So let's talk about the first two things that you're going to jump into. The first thing is going to be your earnest deposit. Now, an earnest deposit is your goodwill deposit to the seller to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I want to buy your house. This is the amount of money I'm going to put down on it. It is typically a refundable deposit, typically, and it's paid to the attorney at execution of contract. The second negotiable contract in the state of North Carolina is your due diligence deposit. Now, the due diligence deposit is the amount of money that allows you to cancel the contract inside of your due diligence period for any reason or no reason. So what goes on inside the due diligence period? Well, it's pretty simple. That's when you're getting all your inspections done. Inspections, man, that's something else you're going to pay outside of closing. Quick thing about both the earnest deposit and the due diligence deposit, they're both totally negotiable fees, okay? Your agent's going to help you mitigate the cost on both of those the best that they can. Now, depending on what type of market it is, it's going to depend on how much money you need to put down one way or the other. So let me start by saying that this 100%, all inspections are optional, but there's no such thing as a bad inspection. So the contract's executed. Let's start the due diligence period. Now, again, the due diligence period is the time that you can have the inspections completed and make the decision: are you going to complete the transaction, or are you going to terminate inside of the due diligence period? Now, you have a specified amount of time that we've negotiated in order to get that done. So you got to be asking yourself a question: what's all these inspections cost? Well, the first inspection is just that. It's a general home inspection. Now, a bare bones inspection is going to cost you probably between $450 and $600. Now, I've seen inspections all the way up to close to $2,000. So you're going to have a list of packages that you're going to be able to choose from with the inspector that you decided to hire to do the inspection. So don't feel like you have to get the top of the line inspection. Do what you're most comfortable doing. So another contingent inspection is the wood destroying or pest inspection. Now, wood destroying organisms in the state of South Carolina is required to be done, and a CL100 is the form that's required to be filled out. Do you have to do that? Absolutely not. You can waive that. I never suggest waiving this because it's also can be a contingency on the contract outside of due diligence. Now, with that being said, you're still getting it done. What's the cost? Usually about $150. So the next three inspections I'm going to talk about are inspections that you may or may not need. Okay, so the number one is going to be your well inspection. Now, a well inspection is just what it sounds like. It is where someone's going to come in. If you pump well water out of the ground as opposed to purchasing it from the city or county, you would probably want to get your well and well water inspected to make sure the well's working correctly and the water is good. You can get that water tested to make sure it's not bad. Look for a cost of about $600 to $650 on that. You're not got county or city sewer, that means you probably have a septic tank. Now, septic tanks are a bear to play with. So you can get a septic tank inspected, usually for about $1,000. That includes a pump out. You want to make sure that gets done if you have a septic tank. Do you have to? Nope, it's optional. But remember, no such thing as a bad inspection. Last inspection I'll talk about is a land survey. Now, surveys are basically, if I have to explain it, companies coming in, they're measuring out based on the meets and bounds and boundaries. They're going to mark the boundaries of your land that you're purchasing. Now, that's usually going to run you around $500 to $600 to complete. And sometimes they are a little bit further out in getting done. Sometimes it's hard to find somebody that can get it done quickly. With that being said, if you feel so led to make sure you get a survey, get it done. Can't hurt. So the next thing you're probably going to have to spend money on, maybe potentially, could not, depends on you, is utility deposits and hookups. So Utility deposits are usually dependent on your credit and or your payment history with that specific company. So the bottom line is the company may charge you a deposit, they may not. You might want to have money set aside. My advice is always check ahead of time so that way you don't get to closing and you're like, oh my goodness, I got to come up with $400 or $500 to get my lights turned on. So the next thing that you're going to have to pay for is an appraisal. Now the lender is going to want to make sure that the property that they are giving you money on is worth what we've written the contract for. So that is going to cost between $600 and $700 generally, and it's generally paid outside of closing. Not every time, but most of the time. So that's going to be something you're going to have to write a check for. Now, one of the fees people tend to forget about is the cost of moving. So if you're hiring somebody to move, it can be very costly. The average move, I think, is something around $1,720 based on some data that I looked up with, I think it was Allied that gave me the information. If it's inside of 100 miles. So it could be much cheaper than that if you're moving yourself. If you're hiring somebody to move you, it may be more expensive than that, or it may be right on. If you're moving further out and you're hiring a mover, chances are you're going to pay sometimes as much as $10,000 to move. The flip side to that is if you do it yourself, you're going to get it much cheaper. But I don't know, man. I don't necessarily want to throw out a back moving a couch. So you've gone through inspections, you've gone through the process. Let's get to the closing table. So I want you to be prepared because by now you've already wired the money. I need you to know ahead of time what you're going to be paying for so that way you're not shocked. So here we go. Let's talk about it. So in order to qualify for a loan, you've likely had to put a down payment down. One of the biggest myths in real estate is that you have to have 20% to buy a house, 20% down to buy a house. That's just plain not true. So in most cases, you can put as little as 3.5% down. So according to Realtor.com, the average home buyer in 2024 put down 14.5%. The average first-time home buyer put down 8%. The average home buyer that has purchased more than one house or is purchasing a second or maybe a third home is putting about 16% down. Different loan products have different down payment requirements. So VA, for example, is a 0 down payment. FHA is 3.5%, and you can go up to different levels through there. But don't think you have to have 20% to buy a house. It's just not true. So for the sake of math, let's do a little math. So if you've got a $400,000 house and you're going to put down 3.5%, 400,000 times 3.5% is a down payment of $14,000. So as you go down to your closing costs, the next thing that you're going to talk about is proration of property taxes. Just for the record, I've got some notes down here. So if you see me look down, I'm just making sure I'm not giving you any bad information. So proration of property taxes and HOA fees. So when you're closing on a house, property tax wise, the seller is responsible from the first of the year through closing day. You are responsible for closing day through the end of the year. So what that means is you're going to get a credit on your closing statement from the seller for the amount of money that they've already paid in taxes. So the HOA payment is going to show up a little bit differently. It's going to show up as a charge to you. So you're going to pay the seller back the amount that they've already paid for the HOA fee in the current period, if they're like in between quarters or whatever. So think about it like this. Say you close on July 10th and the next HOA payment's due August 1st. You would owe the seller the amount of money from July 11th through the end of the month. Make sense? So the next biggest thing after down payment that you're likely going to be paying is for the loan charges. So this is what you're going to pay the mortgage company or the lender in order to make sure that you can get the loan and that they're going to loan the money. Now, this is going to equate to anywhere between 50 and 60% of the total amount of money that you're bringing to the table. So for the record, I'm going to probably be looking down again to make sure that I'm giving you the information as it shows up on your closing statement. So the things that you can look to pay on the loan charges are funding fees, processing fees, tax certifications, underwriting fees, prepaid interest. Now, prepaid interest is what you're paying from the closing day to the end of the month, okay? Because your first mortgage payment isn't due for probably about 45 days. So the next thing that's going to show up is credit report fees because they got to pay to pull your credit, flood certification fees, and any loan funding programs that are government run like FHA, USDA, VA, etc. The next thing we're going to talk about is attorney fees. Now, the attorney, this is what it's going to cost to legally close your transaction. Now, typically these are all flat fees, okay? So that number is not going to be based on another number. So this is something that you can shop for and ask attorneys, while you're shopping for the attorney that you're going to have represent you in the closing, this is questions that you can ask them. You can ask them things like, hey, how much is your closing fees? So there's going to be the closing attorney fees. There's going to be FedEx fees. There's going to be a closing protection letter fee. There's going to be a document review and prep fee. There's going to be file retention fees, and then you're going to pay an update and record fee. So let's talk about impounds. Now, impounds, your lender is generally going to take it upon themselves to pay your homeowner's insurance and your taxes. Now, they could pay your HOA as well, but generally they won't. Now, the reason they do this is because if you don't pay your taxes, the state or the county that you live in can put a lien on your home, and they can foreclose on you for that. If you don't pay your homeowner's insurance and something happens to your house, then at the end of the day, it's going to hurt their investment. They're not going to be able to get their money back out of it. So they do this to protect their assets. So what they're asking you to do is make the first 3 or 4 payments ahead of time. So that way, when the bill comes due, they can pay for it without having to worry. All right, so let's take a quick note on this. So you're making a payment on your homeowner's insurance, and we're going to talk in another video about this stuff, but your homeowner's insurance and your homeowner's insurance and your taxes, that's part of your monthly mortgage payment. Now, after the year after you buy your house, there's a better than average chance that the value of your house from what it was being taxed this year to what it's being taxed next year is going to go up. That's going to cause your taxes to go up, which is going to cause your home payment to go up. Be aware that that's coming. So the next section we're going to talk about is title changes, escrow, and settlement charges. So title insurance, you're going to purchase title insurance, and you purchase it for both yourself and the lender. And what title insurance does, it protects both of you from financial loss due to any kind of activity or any kind of faults inside of the title. That could be liens that were outstanding they didn't know about, back taxes that they didn't know about. Maybe somebody shows up and lays claim to the property. Maybe there's a problem with the title to begin with that just didn't get found. In any event, title insurance is important, and you got to pay for it. Second thing about that's a title binder fee. That's basically the deposit to get the title insurance going. And the last thing in there is title examination fees. That pays the title company and the attorney to go in and make sure that they've reviewed the files 100% and make sure there's no issues with title and that it's clear to close. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk briefly about is commissions. Now, I bring this up because as the buyer, it is your responsibility to ensure that your agent is going to get paid, because after all, we've signed our agreement and I helped you buy your house. I've earned compensation and I got to make sure that I get paid. Does that mean that you're required to pay me directly? Not necessarily. The first way that I get paid is potentially directly from you. Is that you've wrote a check, or at closing, you're bringing the money to pay me directly for my services. Second way is we've negotiated with the seller to pay me directly at closing through their proceeds. And number 3, the listing brokerage has decided that they're going to pay a buyer agent's compensation. So those are the 3 ways that your agent can get paid. So we're almost done. The next thing that needs to get paid is that the attorney has to pay for your title and deed to get recorded by the county and the state. So that way you can make sure that the sale is final and legal. And at the end of the day, they pay that fee, that stamp goes on there, and you now own a home. The only other thing that you may pay in closing or outside of closing is a year of homeowner's insurance ahead of time. Now, this is generally required by the lender to make sure that you have homeowner's insurance on your house ahead of time, because again, you're going to pay it out front and then they're going to make the payments monthly to make sure it never lapses. Does that make sense? So what does all that mean? So all that basically means is you're going to bring money to the closing table. Now, what you can expect is you're going to bring your down payment, and then you're going to bring anywhere from around $5,000 to $6,000 all the way up to, sometimes I've seen north of $15,000 to $20,000. So in case you didn't know, now you do. So maybe that shed a little bit of light for you on the not so common knowledge of what goes into closing costs and what you need to spend in order to buy a house. So with all that being said, I'm going to drop down in the description. You're going to see a couple of real life scenarios of what closing costs may look like for specific price points on a house. You're going to see different, maybe a USDA, maybe an FHA, maybe a conventional. You're going to be able to see those in real life and kind of give you an idea of what you may end up paying when you buy a house. Now, as always, if you have other questions or there's things that I can help you with, drop a comment down below, ask questions, maybe even give me a call, reach out. It's been good talking to you. We'll see you again real soon.